although interbranch and intelligence families are constantly timed collusions slash S per how used remotely at countries A through Z. At the same time, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists, there are predicate acts methods recorded behind people using words like radical and extremism. The subject treatments are, are worse than criminal incompetence, but you know, collusions, leaving out and changing and faking how nature's using exceptions, and they're faking exceptions. On a mass scale, the breaching method uses names on all sides of criminal and civil cases. And the court's names the interbranch family members, their conjunctions at the same time with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, the people tied to their campuses next to them, different natures of conjunctions to them. It's a breaching method that forced collusion with location slash S uses everywhere the human species body is. And it perfected roles with that and with nature's demonstrations of it. Instead, blamed on other things, others themselves, leaving out the shared roles because that's all that was allowed and that's all that was discerned. Now there are layers and layers of things that are truths that we should blame for where and how the world is going down with the nature of it. To make America great again, to make nature, you have to bring nature's identity relationship to itself and the only increasing value of that back. Because the only way it comes back is by getting, it has never stopped decreasing since the breaching method was entrenched here. In other words, all kinds of things have been going on. Even when we have things recorded and things like that, the people behind operating those things, they're they're the only ones there, so they just put fake and change transcripts, fake ties, fake natures of ties to people, including at police departments. The statistics, locations, the campuses A through Z, all ages and natures of including fire and medical campuses. There are and have been involved with all kinds of methods of organized crimes. And this breaching method shows them they have to hide collusion with that in the past and to come and at other locations. And as roles with database relativity by the breaching method since before computers, but then further with the campuses ones and exceptions. This has our founders' communications to us replaced. Not one has traced. They have criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, wrought readings of statutes of precedents and of religious books specifically for the debate, because they have roles where the breaching method uses the nature of the debate contains quality aspects in nature that are overtly slash insidiously criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, wrought. Right where and how this is relativity to where and how our founders' communications are replaced. They had declassified for themselves that and how and why they did not have free speech. Why they did not have free speech because it was a human fact-driven nature breaching method entrenched. And there were roles with it measured and maintained. Specifically to have everyone syntactically in all kinds of ways against themselves and against other people and pretending not to realize, pretending they have free speech anyway to an extent. Otherwise, that body was sensed and it was adapted to, including if that body was a majority of people, including if that body was this simultaneous, the entire species body. I mean, or a whole country. But even if the whole species gets along and we agree to use these abridged systems, nature will continue to demonstrate with negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. At countries A through Z, the people who have been speaking about crimes have been involved with organized crime methods and roles with their difference used exactly what the breaching method knew they would. All sides of criminal and civil cases put in the same sequence shifts, even when the criminal enterprises and private ones aren't involved with those cases. When did they stop being involved with the breaching method? That witch trials are about. Even if they're completely made up, there's a witch trials place next to Webb House. where George Washington had to come right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War, partially because he was counter-extorted and counter-extorting the rest of the founders, or the rest of the key people, to force them to be roles with the unity that was all fake because no one had free speech. Everyone had to pretend other again to an extent, otherwise be sensed. Everyone had to lie about their motivations. Their motivations were also the breaching method. There was a breaching method entrenched. Sickly, distinctly against Native Americans. Sickly, distinctly against everyone's black pupils, whites of eyes. Sickly, distinctly against the very nature that generates this for us to discern, wherein how it generates totally distinct species bodies of individual bodies. Individual species bodies of individual bodies, all group differences generated by that individual identity of vibration. That is not us nor them. It's neither us nor them, but is all things anyway. And many pray, but not only for natural reasons now because of reasons unnaturally imposed upon everyone. As a name that is not names A through Z, has complete possession over the syntactical nature of the names A through Z that could only operate names A through Z country at locations, areas, and states. A hyper-foreign breaching method, even regardless of who invented these things, it has a role. Like with suits and ties, counters and exceptions, it invented use of the whole array as collusion/S in our faces, replacing what our founders declassified. Self-body roles, pretending things are debatable that are not. Uses of the knowledge of good and evil, of the names of the people, the sciences, as them or as anyone else, giving them integrity, but they don't have it. It's not pretending it's personal against them. Anyway, everyone, nature itself is showing us to look to discern where and how there are collusions together, A through Z, with formal subject treatments, leaving out exception nature, leaving out nature's nature, and the only increasing value of that. So please, in other words, Connecticut's Channel 3 News attached me to fake conversations with themselves and others as their roles of a whole bunch of natures of organized crimes and methods of them at the same time. Their roles that they were forcing a proven principal child abuser then, and there were more involved then and now. And one's years apart, and the people that were involved forcing that and hiding that, and way worse, because they have roles of other natures of organized crimes at the same time. There was mass medical corruption involved with the FBI. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, involved with his co-defendants and their family members, involved with a bunch of kids that went to my schools who have roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders, acting tied to people from off the campuses, putting fake things in databases, including at medical campuses and Wethersfield Police Department. They faked conversations of me being there as a kid and then as an adult. And then one time when they arrested me from a classroom, people in that classroom increasingly involved, like Anthony Agman, increasingly involved with medical and sexual offenders of kids, people with other countries, people from, I've never seen him in my area in my life. He's involved with people with predicate acts on my street, identity theft, fraud, slanders. I never had a word of conversation with him in real life. He's on, I might have had like hello one time when it was his house, they made one exception. He was drawing. I had nothing else to do with him. In other words, he was in my class. That class, too, Miss Riley, increasingly, she was an algebra teacher. She's increasingly involved with child abuses in my area. I've never seen her in my area either. She brought it up with confessions repeated. And it's increasingly involved with people with fire departments and people involved with the state capitol and spots next to it. And these are not, they're just using lobbyists. They don't care if it's they're just using that as an excuse to hide any right to lie is used for a fake motive to screen their actual motives. People's actual motives are the breaching method. That's your motive. One of your motives. One of the most real motives when you guys leave out black people's rights of eyes. With nature communicates about it and about the breaching method. Nature itself communicates about that. And our founders did. But you guys have what our founders had declassified for themselves and replaced in self-valued roles. And or two, when you don't realize and you debate it, you have a nature debate and you have debate quality aspects of nature that can't defend themselves and afford to be, let alone to protract. Short words proper with convictions and or with nature. Every database holds lies and or has self-valued roles with as collusions with them out of the location /s. The differences of guilt here or there is also used because this is a breaching method and it needs to keep itself and its roles with things past active that nature is demonstrating with negative value nature progressions action nature to keep needs everyone to do things for itself, keeping other things others themselves blamed for that. Just like the black people's rights of eyes. Our founders communicated for us to blame on the human fact should be nature breaching method. The predicate acts for facts method. The differences method. Differences racketeering method worse than war crimes. Who disbelieves it's that has inherent to act to progressive to their logic, their nature of logic demonstration /s of the same. This is why and how they can't afford to get on writing. And they interbranch the news at the same time. Everything that came before them since they were kids, even things off the record, in other words. And they just fake phone transcripts, whole fake transcripts and the equivalent shown to presidents. The Pentagon and the World Trade Center has worse than war criminal incompetence roles with the New Haven FBI. With former director of the FBI, Robert Luskins, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, involved with the Brit Superior Court's family members, and confessions of Eric Burgess, and other with the Brit Superior Court's family members and intimate ties, also involved with Hartford courts, and people with the Connecticut's District Court before the World Trade Center attack, involved with that West Hartford locations planting evidences. And roles with criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, uses of investigators involved with child abuses, elderly abuses, veterans abuses, differences, racketeering, worse than war crimes. The only counters to types of crimes and things as people collusion /s, victims advocates with New Britain Superior Court and courts across the country are increasingly collusion /s worst. Some of the worst ways. With overt criminal enterprises and private ones. You need to get me off of fake ties, fake nature ties to this Sal Civiello too and his neighbors, increasingly involved, and people his classmates, involved with mayors, increasingly involved with body dumping spots, and people in other ways. Even I pretended that I had a conversation with him. I didn't respond to him when he made a sentence to me with Eric Jensen, involved with a bunch of state police. Involved with the FBI too, and the courts, and their extended family members, and their roles with each other that way, involved with all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders. You guys are sick with the kids. You guys are sick with types of rights defenses. It's like you're showing you need to pretend not to realize you can't follow mandated law at locations. You guys, you already entertain subject treatments like with the differences of campuses. In other words, it's like that. You with the principals, you guys wasting their time more and more. In other words, there's a difference between. There's a reason there are different words: money, economy, resources. Those are different words. Means, that's a different word. Way. The ways and means. These are abridged ways and means. See Native Dreams. I believe it's Traditional Navajo Teachings YouTube channel, or Navajo Traditional Teachings YouTube channel. I think is the one with a speaker who said, we must read each other's dreams, especially because there's a breaching method since before modern religious messengers were born that has the sciences abridged from off their locations, forced collusions at those locations. And that is specifically to have hyper additional collusions, not just there. At other locations, also hyper additional to keep its roles with its use of location /s. And with all that, off the records, even from themselves. They don't understand. The experts, the courts are relying upon American history experts that are used self-valued. Otherwise, they are sentencing for the breaching anyone in that self-valued roles, pretending that that anyone had free speech. But most importantly, our founders, and the only one we know the name of, James Madison. He did not have free speech. James Madison's plan, and the founders with the leverage behind that, is what forced us to get out of slavery. Us to get, in other words, and it was entrenched through countries and through overt criminal enterprises, private ones, in other words. And worse than just terrorism, because the breaching method needed to keep defenses up, names, as the leaders' voices, individual voices, and the people's individual voices. It has to keep not one, only an individual could defend the order of the finite, or the difference. Leaders are forced to entertain those subject treatments we know of. And we know that they force us too. But see, we also know that things are classified. We can't, and if we get into it, we're supposed to not leave out the blame. That we're supposed to blame the breaching method. But that's why we are forced to address everyone guilty at the same time, because that's recorded so many ways. You guys have collusion / replacing what our founders left declassified to be communicated for themselves and for us and for nature itself. 3 ways. And that's important because the rest of it's complete identity of relationship to itself. No increasing value that comes with that. And is functional that way. Hyperintelligence is way better. It already recorded all these ways that artificial intelligence is criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw, incapable of reporting lists properly. Black pupils, period. See whites of eyes in the game. See, we'll watch when we have this, we reverse the colors. We're in the movie. This is going to tell you American history better than you've had it taught. Again, you've had the discernment of our founders as distinct from our presidents / chiefs and as distinct from the rest of the colonists and states, people, citizens, and the rest of the Native Americans. Still like ourselves, still being forced to get the Constitution unabridged. It's not unabridged yet. Still get addressed the clearer than day. Proofs of all location areas in the states, collusion /S being haven't been used remotely, pretending other two, to screen the breaching method past, active, in other words. Everyone speaking for integrity, we know what's actually recorded. There's other. See, but when they get down to putting blame with it, you guys are leaving out the breaching method. You're leaving out the people that are involved with that came through the same campuses. And that's the best of them to the worst of them. And the difference of that also were used, appreciated, and justified between A through Z. In other words, you guys are valuing the breaching method, having obfuscated all the evidences, all the, we present you how to do it here, and someone's taking 50,000 hours to say. In other words, we're supposed to address how the economy itself and how private criminal enterprises originally instilled were forced to entertain by a torture, extortion, human nature, slavery method. We're supposed to force, and this breaching method measures and maintains that we have longing will to reach out. Little kids could help, just with the amount that their parents could give them. And lift people out of poverty in cities from just suburbs, which are tactically denatured. And this is a breaching method where in other words, it's an identity theft, fraud, slander method, 3 ways against every single person, forcing people to speak through others and or to speak for themselves. The difference of that, exactly, criminally foreign influence too. And then Bill would sue about that. That's why they can't get onto paper, because that outcome is maintained through the victim slash hyper victim reactions and or non-reactions. The difference of that. You guys, that's why no one responds. Honestly, when I say things like I was attached to fake conversations about the World Trade Center attack as one of the people that was in the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center right before the attack. Names on all sides of that case, and people with the court involved with other cases the same way, and with the police departments and things like that, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, as ones involved with Saudis before and after the World Trade Center attack, forced collusions with the hyper foreign that we could also discern involved. In other words, as ones increasingly tied to my grammar school that I never even had classes with, and they try to do little fake things to make exceptions in databases. They're putting the databases stacked with magic tricks and uses of it. It's clearer than day how they keep the only three branches of government, how they keep them criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw, pretending not to realize. In other words, and they use this word drugs. They have rules like murders. These are the ones with all those different kinds of crazy drugs and things like that. As the same ones involved with the different qualities of pot and things like that. Oh, that's all they care about. And they just and they're lying about what they think with their motive. And what actually happens when they're increasingly being influenced. All natures of investigators, even when they're not formally they're having their kids and things like that repeat things. Well, ask a question. Their questions are you being used by foreign bodies, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, body dumping spots. A whole bunch of things are brought up to the little kids at once because they confess them. They demonstrate them. Increasingly, people involved with the corners of the streets at a grammar school I went have roles throughout Wethersfield, interstates, and with other countries. A bunch of people in the Britain Superior Court has roles with Russians too, and people with sexual and medical offenders of kids, including tactically delusions raw on a mass scale. And now these are people putting fake transcripts in databases and changing and faking digital evidences. A bunch of people with a Leahy family, little kids in their family involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, forcing that. And they're proven with ones years before that too involved with them. I don't even know where they live. I still haven't got a response for the confessions and things I recorded and had confessed to me by strangers that were planting evidence on my street, rolls with untimely deaths, intercities. I one at Trinity College, even if it was made up, involved with other organized crimes and murders at the same time, and body dumping spots years apart that were brought up at the same time. Even if all that was made up, it shows organized crime making stuff up intercities and then pretending not to understand people, while at the same time putting them in fake transcripts and pretending conversations and ties to police and at the police station. And they hid their life progressions with that, with WFSB News and the news, putting all these fake things in this and through the news. They have a WTNH with the FBI and state police families involved, also with Saudi Arabia, and with people with the name O'Neill, with West Hartford campuses, and with their kids with Wethersfield campuses, with Whiting Forensics, and with a Joshua Julian, involved with a Mark Violet, and a Justin Kovinskis, others with the military from UConn, involved also with lawyers and police forms, all kinds of scams, wire crime acts methods, all kinds of medicines crimes, digital crimes. Get them on paper, one name and sequence. These are some sick fakes with multiple courts personally and professionally involved with them too at the same time. Prepare the mind. Boxing.